Good morning and welcome to Wombs with a View, Maternal Musings with Jenny and Mika. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Mika.
And today we have a curious topic. We've had some messages asking us, what the heck is your show about this week? We decided to call this week's show Babies Are People Too. And what does that mean? Babies are people too. How have we forgotten that babies are people too? Have we forgotten? What do you think, Mika? Have we forgotten, for the most part, in our culture, in our society, that babies are people too?
I think in some ways we have, and in others maybe not. But let's focus on those things that we say without even thinking about it. Don't act like a baby, for instance. What does that actually mean? You know? And today we want to talk about how we can understand newborns, babies better, because there's so much more information we've been able to gather in I think it's now 20, 30 years with neuroscience that's come on board and given us so much valuable information. And it's really a new paradigm in understanding young humans. So we become conscious beings even in utero. And early on, around 5 months in pregnancy, our fetuses, our babies can start hearing and sensing touch, and so much in their awareness is developing. So, Jenny, would you like to say a few words about bonding with your baby during
Yeah, I
pregnancy?
would love to. Thank you. And it's something I don't, I mean, I think, what do you say? We have this idea that it's really normal, and we hear that it is very, very common, at the very least, that we don't feel much of a connection necessarily with our babies when they're born. And we often say, not to worry too much. It comes in time. So I kind of always had that in the back of my mind, especially the first time around. Um, I had the placenta, I had anterior placenta, and I couldn't feel my daughter moving. And what did I say? I didn't really work on nurturing that kind of connection in too much in pregnancy, because I didn't think that you could. And then, as with a lot of second or third time pregnancies, you tend to tap in and tune in to that baby a little bit more, because you already been there, done that. That was my experience, and that's what I see with other moms that we work with. Anyway, the second, third time, you kind of connect a little bit more easily. So I guess it was part of my experience and part of what I thought was, just normal, that as a prenatal yoga teacher, I never really pushed or even really taught in the beginning too much of how to connect with baby while pregnant. And in more recent times, as Mika and I took this hypnobirthing training to teach hypnobirthing childhood education classes, we really learned techniques, and we learned how important it is to nurture that connection in pregnancy. And even though it is common that we don't always feel this super big connection in pregnancy until baby, and sometimes even in those first days and weeks, people aren't feeling much of a connection. We don't know this person, but the idea is really to get to know this person while they are still on the inside. So in our classes, in our hypnobirthing classes, we have a number of ways to help you do that, help you nurture that connection. If it could be very, very simple things. Mika said sensing noise, and even touch. And, there are a lot of moms and dads too who will rub the belly with cream every night, chat with baby. Sometimes people have a certain song that they sing or that they play, and just have music and purposeful speaking to the baby. And it makes sense that when they come out, they know your voice. And I'm convinced that those babies, the moms who took my prenatal classes weekly or twice a week, when they came back to postnatal, those babies even knew my voice. So just imagine that if you're talking to your child every day in utero, they're gonna know you when they come out.
And as you're telling your story, I'm thinking of mine. My mom, which I dearly love, she actually introduced me early on when I was pregnant with my first, that it's so important to purposefully talk with my baby. And one of the things she taught me, which I found so valuable during that pregnancy and also the next one, is to let my baby know when I go through something that may be scary or I'm feeling overwhelmed, to talk to my baby and let them know what I'm going through. and to create a little bit of that space for the baby to understand this is mom's, or this is my experience. I know you're feeling it. It's crossing to the placenta. Babies pick up and feel our moods. And when we are anxious and scared, the adrenaline, the cortisol that is flowing in our bloodstream, we're certainly kickstart that for the baby as well. But with a soothing voice to let them know that this is what is happening right now, and I'm okay and you're okay, goes such a long way. And recently I've seen that there's research in this area, that if you are going through something prenatally, so during pregnancy, during labor, and the baby is still inside you, if you start to explain purposefully to the baby what is happening, it actually calms them down and allows them to be more resilient and to cope better with whatever they're going through. So there's often this split that happens when we're scared, and separation. So here's a way to kind of understand that that connection can make a difference for the baby's experience, even in utero. And yeah, once they're born, and the fourth trimester, that's something that, if you haven't heard this term before, we're talking about the first 3 months of baby's life, the fourth trimester. I think that newborns still think that they are in utero. The way they act, the way they show up are, they are looking for everything that's familiar to them. And often in my prenatal education, when I talk to parents, I kind of take them into the world of in utero. What did they experience? So there's constant noise in the uterus. So the blood
But
flow.
it's not the noise of the beep beep truck that we're hearing there, right?
That's the construction.
They want to think that they're still in utero, but if you compare, even just they just arrived, they were in this warm, cozy, dark space that they heard shh, this kind of white noise, and then all of a sudden they're most likely in a hospital room with fluorescent lights and people shouting stuff, and they're cold and probably quite scared, right? It sounds traumatic, and I actually think that it is. Sorry, I'll put that out there like that. That's why, again, like to go back to our hypnobirthing, that's why we try to encourage, and other types of birth education, we try to encourage the families to make that birth space as quiet and cozy, dim light, so that it's not this immense shock to the system when baby arrives, because we want them to still feel like they're in the womb in that third trimester.
Fourth.
Definitely in the third.
It's the third turning to the fourth, right? It's that movement between the worlds that birth is. And yes, gentle birth, peaceful birth. It's something that you and I talk about a lot. And we believe that in any space, any place that you're giving birth, that is something that is possible. And it's the awareness that we have that can allow that to be, to that movement from the inside to the outside, to be a little more smooth and to welcome them into a gentle world. And so I was talking, and then the construction, there's a lot of construction going on on my street these days. Like the next 3 weeks, we're going to be in this noisy environment. But even a baby who is coming from that bloodstream, heartbeat environment that they're constantly hearing these noises, suddenly if it's silent, they don't feel safe because that's not familiar for them. So one of the things that we can do when we are with our newborns is actually to give them that our voices, our soothing tones, sing to them. Not everybody wants to sing, but even if you don't have a singing voice, your baby won't know.
It feels natural too, right? Like I find for people who don't think that they're singers or who don't love singing, we all kind of end up singing to our babies naturally, 2 a.m.
Oh,
we're
yeah.
singing something.
The songs I made up for my babies. You find yourself repeating these sentences over and over again. It's time to sleep. It's time to sleep. Or just singing along what you're doing with them, describing every move. But that's the beginning of language development, basically. And that repetition allows them to start to form those connections in their brains. But before I talk about the brain, which I find is a fascinating topic, I'm just going to continue to talk about that in utero environment. So the second thing, and you said it before, babies are hugged in utero. especially in those last weeks when they're growing and there's less and less space for them. And they're basically feeling the uterine wall surrounding them with this snug, cozy hug. And then suddenly, when they're out in the world, their limbs are all over the place and there's this endless space around them. So babies look for that connection and that to be held and basically hugged. If it's in a baby carrier, and maybe you'll say something about baby wearing, Jenny. That's something I
Yeah,
know is
sure.
close to you.
I was certifiably obsessed with baby wearing. I had every kind of carrier you could imagine. I loved it, and I still love it as a postpartum doula. For the families who are still happy to have me wear the baby, that's one of the first things that I do. But one of the reasons for it, I mean, there's many reasons for it. But in talking about that fourth trimester, it's getting, especially if you have one of those wraps, one of those nice, cozy, cotton, stretchy wraps where you can keep them in nice and close. They're warm. They hear the sound of your heart, whether it's mom's heart or dad's heart or the caregiver's heart, whoever's heart it is. They hear your breathing. They hear noises that are similar to what they heard in utero. Plus, you have your hands free to, talk on Facebook or whatever you want to do.
And Valerie Namer, which is an osteo that's going to come on our show June 18th, she gave me an interesting tip that you can do skin to skin with the carrier. Mm-hmm. So often when we think of skin to skin is a practice that we can do right from the moment our babies are born. They're placed on our chest. They're covered with a blanket. That keeps their body temperature regulated. It allows their metabolism to stabilize. They feel safe, like we said before, and secure because they are in an environment that they feel that is familiar. So many times I find that parents think that skin to skin, we need to just lay there with our babies on top of us, but we can actually expand the time we do skin to skin with our babies by using these cloth carriers, by continuously doing skin to skin with mom and dad throughout the first weeks of baby's life, which has so many benefits for the baby's growth and for the baby's development. And the third piece that I find is important to recognize when babies move out of their snug in utero space is that they're used to being moved. And often I ask parents, when are your babies most active? And what do they say, Jenny? What's the time?
On the outside, it's certainly not during the day when we would prefer for them to be more active. They're like little hamsters, right? They're nocturnal because they always were.
Because when we move around, we're basically rocking them to sleep. We're lulling them to sleep. And when we are not moving, when we are passive, that's when they wake up. So when babies are born for about 3 weeks, they're completely flipped. They are more awake during the night, and there's many reasons for that. Maybe we can do a whole show about that, Jenny. And they are sleepy during the day. And it takes time for them to sink and to basically change that rhythm that they're so used to. And that also talks about why newborns need to be moved and to be soothed to sleep. They need to feel that familiar kind of movement. And often I find with newborns, it's actually this vertical movement, which is very similar to what we do when we walk. That's what, even though they're head down, I'm always thinking
it is
of that.
funny, eh? We always have this kind of image of rocking babies like this, but it really is kind of the bounce. I always tell people, hang on to your birth ball and you just sit on those big yoga or exercise balls and you bounce and you save your knees a little bit. I had like this set up with my kids. That was how they slept, and I accepted that was how they slept. It was like in the carrier, a boob in the mouth, bouncing on the ball, and singing to them. So sometimes it was pulling all of the stops out at the same time.
Wow.
And it worked.
Yeah. So the sucking is a really strong reflex. It's a survival reflex that we're all born with, and it also soothes us. So we need to be fed and also nourished, and that nourishment is also that feeling closeness and held. So all of these things can allow us to be creative. So if we're thinking of our newborn, what kind of sounds can we help with? Like when we're changing a diaper, just don't be silent. Talk to your newborn. Mm-hmm. Probably the diaper change will flow a little better. Because many newborns actually cry when we change their diapers. And move your baby a lot. Like that also helps them to start to be aware of their balance in their own bodies. So holding them and carrying them in the carriers, and then the touch, that all of this just comes together. So the different positions you can hold a newborn, and every newborn's different. And I find that babies are people too. We are all unique, and so are newborns. And I love what Carrie Conti, she's a perinatal and prenatal and perinatal psychologist. She talks about big beings and little bodies. And I just love that, because babies are not a clear slate. They're not a blank slate when they're born. Everything is already there. And I learned from her through one of her amazing TED Talks, actually, that talks about the power of the pause. If any of you want to watch, we can maybe put that in the comments below. Jenny, I'll put it there. She talks about how our brains are not fully developed at birth, but they're all already there. So when we emerge into the world, we already have everything, like our personality is already there, but it's not wired yet. And there is an evolutionary purpose for that, because it helps us adapt to the environment that we're born in, that allows us to survive better, basically. So that's kind of the magnificent human body at birth, is so adaptive, is so open to be the best version of ourselves, right? In the place that we're born into. So Carrie Conti talks about the triune brain. So the idea, that very simplified model of the brain. And this is really helpful, I find, to understand. And for those of you listening to us on podcasts, you can't see the model that I'm going to show now, but I'm going to talk you through it. So my hand is a brain model, and the brain stem is the reptilian brain, which is basically the most primitive part of our brain. It's the fight, flight, freeze part of our brain, and it allows us basically to have these basic functions that we're born with: suckling, sleeping, heart rate, breathing, all of these things that our parasympathetic nerve system does without us needing to think about, and allows the babies to thrive in the outside world. And for the first 6 weeks, this is the brain that's on board. The rest of the brain is not connected yet. It's not wired yet. And that first social smile, remember that, Jenny?
I see them a lot in other people's babies. I love it.
Yeah. Around 6 weeks, right? That's where that mammalian brain comes on board, which is now my thumb that I'm placing in the middle of my palm.
Obviously.
Yeah, but for those who can't see me right now. And that's where the emotions come on board, and the ability to make eye contact and social connection. And this is the brain that we share with all mammals. So the limbic system. And for the next couple of months, this is the brain that kind of powers us through and is very on board and creates connection. So knowing that those first 6 weeks, our babies need to feel safe, secure, and these are Dan Siegel's 4 S's. So safe, secure, soothed. And when all of these are met, what's the fourth one, Jenny? Do you remember? Safe, secure?
I'm not sure I'm thinking of Harvey Karp's book, but I don't know who you just threw in there. But he has, no, I don't know if we're talking about the same people.
No, it's
I'm
the
thinking
same.
Harvey Karp is on the block. They come from the same place. So there's God, I don't know. I read it 10 years ago, but he wants them on the side, sucking side, shushing. I'm on the spot. I don't know. They're
fine.
all S's in there, but
Yeah, but that's the soothing S's.
yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I'm talking about the secure, safe, soothed, secure, good for me, and the last one, seen. We all want to be seen, right? So right from newborn, we want to be seen, and when all of these are met, then we feel secure in the world. That's Dan Siegel. That he's written an amazing book called The Whole Brain Child.
I have not read that.
I haven't.
We'll put that in the link in the
Yeah.
links too for anybody who wants to read
A
it.
very good one to understand neuroscience and infancy in children. It's
Well,
really
it is
great.
when we start to realize how normal, and this is a lot of what for those of you who caught the show 2 weeks ago when Leslie Everest was on, what we were talking about with the modern sleep training techniques and why they're often highly inappropriate is because babies who are way too young to understand what we're trying to do, they're essentially understanding that we're ignoring them, that we don't see them, we don't hear them. Fine, it works because they stop crying, but they're stopping crying because they don't feel seen or heard, and they know we're not coming back to get them. Sorry, Jenny B's in a harsh sounding mood today, but that's just what what it is.
There is research that shows that their cortisol level, the stress hormone, goes up, and they basically give up on us. So I can join you there. I think we come from the same school of thought about sleep training. I'll just finish my little model here because I find it so interesting to understand that the human brain, the neocortex, comes on board around 8 months. And if you've been around an 8-month-old baby, every day they're learning new things.
Mm-hmm.
And around 9-10 months is where they start to really connect and be interested in other beings around them. And it's just fascinating to see. Carrie Conti talks about the power of the pause, and I think that's kind of maybe the thing we can wrap up with. When we are with a newborn, one of the things we need to pay attention to is their cycle of rest and alertness. They have the same kind of cycle that we have every 24 hours. It's just that it's compressed into 6-7 times in the same, they sleep, eat, play about 3 hours, and then the cycle starts all over again. And understanding that we can't just stretch them forever because they're going to be overstimulated, overtired, and cranky and have a much harder time to fall asleep. That is so important in those first months of baby's life, and to just honor that they have a different rhythm than we do. And that's another show we can do on how to, especially now during these pandemic months that we've been through, when the caregivers have been mostly on their own with newborns. It's such a high pace, schedule that we need to cope with when we're taking care of a newborn. It's a lot of work. If you haven't been there, maybe you don't understand. But if you have, it kind of dawns on most of us. And recently I've been hearing from a lot of the parents that I support in birth is that they are so at awe about their own parents. They're suddenly so grateful for what they received from their own parents. So that's just a side note.
I even say to my kids now when I'm in, when you're up to here at the end of the day or the end of the weekend, whatever it's been, and you've done all this shit for them, and they just mine are 8 and 10 now. So I really feel that sometimes it's not always gratitude. It's a lot of taking for granted. I'm like, you know what? One day when you're a mom, you're going to understand all of the things I did for you, but it's impossible in that moment for them. We don't know until we do it ourselves, the sleepless nights and all the things that our parents went through. And God, even labor and trying to understand how nursing works. You don't get it till you're there. You can't. And it's okay.
Because it's okay. It's totally okay. It's just acknowledging that it's intense. But in that intensity and with the newborn, what I wanted to share, and this comes from Carrie Conti, is that moment where they make eye contact with us and they make this noise, they gurgle or they do wah, and then we do wah, and then they go woo, and we go wow. And then there's that moment where they look away and they are taking a moment of integration. And if we'll try to kind of bring them back, we're going to override their system. Because in those first months, what happens in the pause is that the brain is now connecting that experience that they just had with us. It's creating new neural connections and allowing the baby to look away. And we can also take a moment to take some breaths or drink a glass of water. That is such an important realization to kind of respect that. Because the baby takes a moment to orient and connect with their body. They regulate by kind of closing down their senses and coming a little more inside. They integrate, and that's a place of where they can get inspiration because it's building this new layer in their brain, and creativity is starting to be formed. So that doesn't end in infancy. That's a place that if we are constantly on the go in our modern society with all these electronics, we're constantly on the go and we're not allowing ourselves enough to pause. We're missing out. We're missing out on so much. Do without be does not allow us to tap into our inner creativity. So
it's the resourcing for sure. It's the rest and digest instead of, we're talking about the systems and being constantly, go, go, go. And I guess we do need to stimulate our little ones, our newborns, as well as they start to grow, but not overstimulate them. And that pause that Mika's talking about, to let them, I hadn't heard it worded like that before, Mika. Thank you.
that's Carrie Conti. Thank her.
I will.
Yeah, so this was great. I think the bottom line that we want to tell you today is that babies are people too. They have a little different needs than we do. Understanding them goes such a long way. And yeah, it's, I think in some ways that rhythm that the newborns have continues throughout our lives. So that's the babyhood we all have inside us. And yeah, have a great weekend.
Sometimes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a never-ending subject, really. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Have a good weekend, Mika, and we look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks from now. Mika will be on the show with Valerie, who is an amazing osteopath.
Not yet, though. We need another show there, Jen.
No, there's 1 week, there's nothing, and then it's Val.
It's 18th. Oh, okay. So it's my counting now. Okay, great.
Yay!
I'm so looking forward to having Valerie with us. She's amazing.
It'll be awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Enjoy the rest. I hope you get some